Dr. Reed, can you talk a little bit about what race reductionism is with maybe one or two examples? And what are the consequences of race reductionism?
So race reductionism, I guess to get at what race reductionism refers to, I should probably talk about class reductionism, because race reductionism is kind of a response to the ubiquitous charge of class reductionism that had gained a lot of traction in late 2015 around the announcement of Senator Bernie Sanders' plan to try to win the Democratic nomination for president in 2016. And, at the time in late 2015, I had thought a class reductionist, and Sanders, as we all know, was regularly characterized as a class reductionist. And I should say, often enough, in a way that misrepresented the failings of post-war liberalism, at least the root causes of the failings of post-war liberalism, by about 180 degrees. But again, I mean, we know that charge was ubiquitous, right? And has taken on a life of its own in many ways. And at the time, I had thought a class reductionist was someone who thought that racism, sexism, homophobia, et cetera, were either secondary or inconsequential to the life chances of people, right? That fundamentally, what the obstacles that mattered, that impacted people's lives or undercut their ability to progress, boiled down to class. And again, that racism, sexism, homophobia, et cetera, were secondary and inconsequential. And I came to realize that well, first, I mean, I guess such people might exist. I don't know any of them personally. I certainly am not friends with them, but to be fair, one of the reasons that I might not be familiar with such individuals is I'm not on Twitter. But and that has kept my blood pressure a little lower than it might be otherwise, and hopefully will extend my life just a little bit. But what was striking to me about the charge is, while such people may exist, I'm not one of them, right? And I've found myself, and I've known lots of other people who don't believe that racism, sexism, homophobia are inconsequential, right? Who have been charged with class reductions. I have argued, since I was a teenager, a long time ago in the Reagan years, for the value of affirmative action. And no one should have cared about that when I was a teen, but I've consistently argued for the value of anti-discrimination policies. I understand my parents, my father's here, obviously, but I understood my parents to be beneficiaries of anti-discrimination policy, Civil Rights Act of 1964, and its implications, its actualization. Opened up employment opportunities for both my mother and father. I grew up in a Black homeowners neighborhood in Southwest Atlanta, thanks in part to the Civil Rights Act of 1968. So, and I understood myself as a trickle-down beneficiary of anti-discrimination policy, the way that children are vis-a-vis their parents, but a real world, a real time, I should say, beneficiary of anti-discrimination policy, because I've known racists, right, and sexists and homophobes and the like. And so I've argued quite consistently for the value of anti-discrimination policies as one who is alive to the reality of discrimination. And yet, despite the fact that and I think Senator Sanders, who cares about him? He's not here now. But my father, Barbara Fields, a host of other so-called Black class reductionists are regularly called class reductionists. And what became apparent to me was that what a class reductionist was fundamentally within this charge, what the charge referred to as a kind of shotgun blast leveled at people who I would say take the social constructiveness of race seriously, who follow through on the full implications of what the social constructiveness of race would mean, but who insist more narrowly that while racism, sexism, et cetera, impact people's lives, that anti-discrimination policies alone cannot achieve the desired end of a more just society, because Black people, and that's who I'll focus on from this point on, Black people don't exist in a warp bubble in which time and the events in time happen around them, right? That we are human beings like everyone else and are impacted like everyone else, by political economy. And so what is necessary is not simply anti-discrimination policies, but instead, you know, redistributive economic policies. And this is not a new idea, right? The left critics of the war on poverty, obviously in the 1960s, were very clear that anti-discrimination measures alone could not suffice in redressing racial inequality, because race is, since it is a social construct, and I guess we'll end up exploring what that means, but since it is a social construct, what we often enough think of as racial inequalities are actually, as much as anything else, reflective of broad trends in American political economy that often impact Blacks disproportionately, but rarely exclusively. So again, what a race reductionist then would refer to is someone who insists that race, well, has taken on a life of its own, independent of American political economy, right? And that would no longer make race a social construct. In fact, I think if you insist that racism has taken on a life of its own that operates independently of American capitalism, I mean, that's another way to put it if political economy seems too indirect. But people who insist that race operates independently and racial inequality operate independently of American political economy, of American capitalism, I think often enough find themselves reifying race, right? And they find themselves then staking out positions on race that are often enough, and racial inequality, that are not only inadequate to redress the problems that do indeed impact Black people disproportionately, but not exclusively, but they often enough reify race.